I am the programming administrator for our substance abuse programs throughout the entire state and in all of our correctional facilities that are under the Department of Corrections. This presentation is primarily geared for women. A lot of the concepts can be applied to men, but so as I go through it today, just know that this was originally put together to address the wounds of incarceration for women. You know, how many women are locked up in the United States? You know, in the US, 5% of the world population. So, you know, when you think of that, in the United States, we have 5% of the world's population that's incarcerated. That's a little bit crazy. And I think this is why education is such a big deal in addressing education, because we really want to bring that percentage down. In US, the women make up a third of the female prisoners in the entire world. So that's even a little bit more concerning, that we are incarcerating so many women. And you can kind of see on this little graph here that, you know, it's getting pretty close. Well, state prisons still is a larger percentage, but between jails and prisons, that's where the majority of our women are. Even when you look at the federal prisons, you know, it's significantly different than that of our state or our local jails. I have a lot of videos that I think speak better than me, so I'm just going to keep moving through these slides. But I think some of the biggest things to be aware of when you're dealing with our offenders that are incarcerated, there are a lot of effects that come to you on top of all the things that happened to you before you even got to prison or jail. You know, once you get here, your exposure to violence, that potential is there. A lot of times we think women aren't violent. They can be violent, right? And sometimes you see violence in a very different way. We have some women that come to prison that are very violent and are perpetrating violent crimes, but that's a very small percentage. But then you come to prison and you start seeing fights of those women that aren't here for violent crimes. That can be very startling for them. Mental health related issues. We know the majority of women that come to prison, their pathway that got them here, there is some mental health related issue. We were working really hard in our communities to improve our mental health services, but we're still really behind in being able to provide that. So a lot of the women, when they get here, that is a big thing that we need to be focusing on. And sometimes we, honestly, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way as educators, we just don't have the staffing resources to be able to address all of those issues. I put on here housing. So we know when women come to prison, more often than not, they lose whatever housing that they had prior to coming. So meaning they were living with a boyfriend or a husband or a family member, and then when they come to prison, that really is gone. It doesn't stay connected with them. We know there's a huge difference and disparity between men and women that come to prison. Men don't have as big a problem as finding housing when they're released as women do. And so that becomes this new stressor in their life of, now I'm incarcerated, I'm losing my contacts, my relationships, which then in turn, they lose their housing options. Same with employment. We know, unfortunately, women in the workforce, a lot of their jobs are more very entry level, and then the jobs that they go out to don't pay at the same rate that the jobs that often men can get. So, you know, a lot of our offenders that are males, they can go out and they can get a construction job making $25, $30 an hour. Where our women, when they leave prison, their employment options are, they're less diverse and they have less earning power with them. You know, they're going back into more fast food restaurants, clerical type jobs that aren't usually a wage that can be a living wage for them. So employment becomes a really big issue and stressor. Lack of support, all you have to do is come to visiting at the prison. And see how many people are visiting the men versus how many people visit the women. It's significantly less. Long story short is relationships usually fall apart for the women when they come to prison. or their families, their parents, they're taking care of their children. And so while they might want to come and visit their daughter or their wife or that significant other, they're in the process of taking care of their children, and finding daycare to make that happen sometimes becomes really difficult. And so they get less of that support. Addiction, we know the number one pathway of women to corrections is through addiction. And it's not the same as it is with men. So that's a big issue that we're constantly trying to address with them, is that primary issue that brought them here. Then the longer that you are in prison, the more times you return to prison, you become really dependent on the institutional structure. Long story short is, there's this little term that we use in prison, you get 3 hots and a cot. They use that in jail too, right? Like when you have to choose between being homeless or living in a very impoverished living environment versus maybe coming back to prison, sometimes these women would much rather be in prison, as odd as that sounds, but there you can depend on stability here. Even though there's all these other maybe negative factors, when we just look at that Maslow hierarchy, you know what? Just our basic safety needs and a roof over our head are the very first things that we're all kind of worried about. And so that is part of what oftentimes will make them very dependent on our institutional structure. Also, when they come to prison, they develop even more so than what they might have had before due to maybe some trauma issues, is this hypervigilance, this interpersonal distrust and suspicion, right? Like it's not like it is in the movies, but it does still create, you've got to watch your back. You don't get to pick who you live with. People don't keep their word in here, it sometimes is, I just have to look out for me. And so developing those trustful relationships don't happen very often. I mean, they're really the exception to the rule. And so what we forget is we are creating even more for these women that might have come in due to some trauma, even a greater hypervigilance and greater levels of that interpersonal distrust or suspicion that people aren't being genuine. And that kind of leads to some social withdrawal, like the way to sometimes survive is to withdraw from overly putting yourself out there in vulnerable ways, which then can lead to isolation. Now, if you would come to the women's prison, you would say, oh, those women, they're all talking, they're interacting, they're getting along. They develop their social structure, but it doesn't mean that personally with areas that they need to grow that are going to be really helpful with them, those are oftentimes the areas that they're socially withdrawing. So, our norms in prison culture are not the same norms that you have in general society, right? So the longer you're in prison, the more you become acculturated to the prison norms. And then when you get out of prison, those same things don't apply. So, who you share information with, a lot of offenders, right or wrong, they don't trust staff. They don't want to go to an officer and talk to them for help, even though something negative is going on in their life, which is a norm that we want in society, right? If there is a problem, we want to be able to call the police if I'm feeling like I'm being abused or someone's broken into my home or stolen something from me. In the prison, if someone steals something from you and you go to custody, you're a snitch, and it's going to be 3 times worse for you. So we're creating these cultural norms that don't transfer out to society, that then kind of set them up that sometimes they have a really hard time of undoing when they are released. And then last but kind of not least, this diminished sense of self-worth and personal value. I think all of us can kind of relate. If I was to be arrested tomorrow and put in jail or prison, my sense of how I feel about myself would definitely diminish. And I don't know that we have yet conquered of how to bring people into our correctional systems and help them rebuild their sense of self-worth and personal value. Because what we're doing is we're pulling them out of society, we're telling them what to do, when to do, and how to do it, and not giving them any autonomy because they haven't been able to show that ability for themselves prior to getting there. but we forget that also doesn't develop a good self-worth of humans. That is the opposite of what we know will help people feel better about themselves. And so, but what I do want to say, one caveat with that is, I feel like we're trying really, really hard in corrections. And this is where you guys come in as educators. This is where we come in on my side as programming, that we're doing everything we can to help them change their thinking and find those areas of self-worth, whether that's through, completing their GED or passing a math class that maybe they never understood in their whole life, and now they come to prison and they have that instructor that's helping them do that, and they can start to change those belief systems that I'm no good at math, and I'm never going to be able to balance a checkbook, even understand what the stock market even means. And now they come here and you give them some of those basic, that baseline that they can do that, and that does build their self-worth. But we forget those are only small pieces, because there are lots of other areas that self-worth and that personal value is being questioned. Another area that we see that being incarcerated tends to have some negative effects is it actually increases impulsivity and poor attention control, right? Because when you come to prison, everything's on a snap decision, right? Like, so if something happens in your section, like, you've always got to be on guard, and you may be very impulsive of how you act, because you're kind of in this trauma response of this fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so that increases that impulsivity to not feel safe, to think through things before you act. So oftentimes they become more impulsive. And same with that poor attention control. When you are always worried about being aware of what's going on around you, you can't just focus on one thing and really put your time and energy into that. And so over time, that does create that. And I apologize, I'm reading the slides here, but these kind of cognitive changes indicate that that their conscientiousness, it's a trait with self-discipline, orderlessness, and ambition have deteriorated. So basically, by putting them in an environment where they have to be, for lack of a better term, on guard all the time, we are actually creating some cognitive changes in their brain, in the way they manage. And it goes away from some of the basic things that they need, especially when they're learning, and that is that self-discipline and ordering, and being able to follow order and being ambitious. And part of that just comes with the nature of prison. Everything is so structured here for them that they're not always the ones creating that self-discipline. Once again, caveat, I feel like we're constantly trying to create programs and relook at how we're doing things to create that for them, but it is still something that is difficult to do in a prison setting. I really like this next thing, the impoverished environment of prison, including the lack of cognitive challenges and loss of autonomy, that this is what they're finding, the researchers are finding, that have that less capability of living that lawful life or reintegrating back into society. And so, we have a double-edged sword here. Like, we have to keep order, we have to manage them, but in so doing, by over-managing them, it does have some negative cognitive effects and challenges for them. So I think that's something that, as we are teaching and whatnot, we can't control how the prison's set up, but you can control how your class is set up. What autonomy are you giving them? What are the cognitive challenges that you're giving them in those classes? Really becomes a big piece of helping them not lose, trying to avert that impoverished environment that they're in. I think we forget that when you come to prison, it's, while you have your 3 hots and a cot, you don't have all those other things that can stimulate you in life, and those autonomy choices that you get to make. So, on the weekends or in the evenings, you have the choice if you want to go to the gym, if you want to go snowshoeing, if you want to go skiing, if you want to sit on your couch and watch your favorite show. You have all those options, and then that's where you develop this sense of self of how you choose what you're going to do with your time. Well, in prison, depending on your lock code, and even if you have a late lock, after a certain time, all you get to do is go back to your housing unit. Maybe we have some volunteer programs that are coming in that you can go to, but your choices are really limited. And by limiting those choices, we are also limiting that cognitive growth, and so they start to get stunted again, and that's concerning. There's obviously a lot of homeless rates among formerly incarcerated people. And if you just look at this, the one thing that I just want you to see is that women have a much higher rate. It's in the yellow here. All those that are incarcerated are going to have a larger risk to become homeless, but women have an even greater risk. And I would tell you that is a big part due to that loss in relationships. A lot of these women, their relationships weren't healthy to start out in the first place, and they end up going back to a really unhealthy relationship. And when they don't want to be abused anymore, they leave and they become homeless, kind of wandering until they feel like they're finding that next safe place. And oftentimes that's just kind of a merry-go-round for them. They're getting on and off of trying to find, a safe place to live, which is one of our biggest challenges in corrections, is a safe place to live. Now, I have quite a few video clips, because I think these real women that have been in prison do a much better job of speaking to the wounds, to the obstacles and the struggles that they found, and wanting to let you know either what they've done to overcome those or what they're wanting people to know that are helping them.
80% of our population has been traumatized. The trauma is the underlying reason and the basis that leads to the self-medication, the drug use, and then eventually landing in jail. This was in '94. At this point, I was homeless, sleeping beneath a bridge, eating out a trash can. I couldn't go in anybody's house, including my mother's. Right here I have, you can't really tell, 2 black eyes and a busted lip. Thank you for receiving us here in El Paso. My name is Tonia Kane. I was molested, I was raped, I was beaten, I was raped. And I was like, this is how it's supposed to be for me. I am nothing, I'm never gonna amount to anything, and this is how it is. And I'll stay here, I'll die just like this. And I had become comfortable with that. These 2 houses were crack houses. He brought me down here to get high with it. He said, if you don't sleep in the bus stops no more. Using crack cocaine introduced me to the criminal justice system. He thought I was trying to, I guess he thought to run off, and he thought I was resisting. So when he grabbed me, he grabbed my arm and put it behind my back and threw me against the car, which cracked my nose open. My mother had a way of, when she hit you, she would hit you with a belt, and she would hold the strap of the belt so the belt would hit you.
It's so not showing the video.
The belt buckle.
Put that bottle down.
No, you. That's why I'm leaving.
Put that goddamn bottle.
I'm a woman.
I was beat, I was raped, I was hurt, I was beat. Okay, that's happening no more. But my children are still living. They're still walking this earth somewhere, and I know nothing about them. How do you heal from that? And she said, you do. What are you thankful for?
Mommy.
Treating my trauma totally broke that intergeneration curse.
Good morning. I'm living the American dream. I'm in debt.
She now, as of yesterday, officially has become the team leader for the newly funded National Center for Trauma-Informed Care.
And I can keep singing.
Why can't we keep working at it? Why can't we work at it ourselves? 83 arrests and 66 convictions. 3 times down here and multiple times in the county jail. They said I was going to spend the rest of my life in jail and die. I wasn't going to amount to anything. Not so. Not so.
Hey, Marcy.
Yeah.
We could hear it great, but the video didn't play.
Okay, I will make sure. I apologize, and for interest of time, I won't replay it, but I'll make sure that it's on the other screen. I think that might have been the problem. So this is Tonair Kane, who I think the biggest thing, what you could hear from that is she had been given a lot of labels, and she had been incarcerated many times. And really, I apologize you couldn't see the video because it's the most powerful part of it, to see this woman who was formerly incarcerated and really learn that she needed to heal her trauma to be able to move forward. And then when she got out, she dedicated her life to helping others. What I want our takeaway to be from that is, what is our role in helping these women not feel labeled in the same way that they label themselves? So in that video, there's a part where it shows, she's on crack, and she's an incarcerated female, and she has how many X amount of arrests. Is that who she is, or is she Tonair Kane? And I think that's the important part for us as educators, is how do we help them see them as who they are, by their name? I think sometimes even something as simple as that, when we're teaching, calling them by their name and helping them figure out who that is so powerful, rather than, you're this drug conviction, or you're this, fraud case, and really helping them get in tune that they are more than their crime, is a critical piece. Now, I wanted to kind of open it up to you guys, and this is the hardest part of doing it online, right? But you guys are all working in corrections in some format. So I wanted to know what your experiences with working with wounded females are. What are some of the things that you've seen that are wounds with the women? And for our purposes today, you can even share with men that you've encountered. Okay.
This is Todd.
Oh, go for it.
So I don't know if Angie's on here or not. She's my teacher in the women's in Timpanogos. But over the years, we've had Liz Davies in there teaching, and since Angie and Liz teamed up and then Angie retired, I think the strongest thing they do out there is they're good role models of good, strong women. And I think that's been one of the best things in our program out there, is trying to put people in there that are real good, positive role models, and the way they interact with the women in there is kind of an empowering type way. So just wanted to add that. I don't know if she's on here or not, but we have some others now. Barbara Erickson's working over there too, and I know she's that same way. So I think that's important.
And I would second that, and I apologize. I do know Liz. I've worked with her for many years out here, and I can't even agree with you enough with that, right? And the other thing, I'll give you an example that goes along with that. In the prison, we have the base level of educating, but you also have tutors that those teachers are mentoring. And I know for a fact from some working with some women, that being able to go to that tutoring job and feeling like not necessarily an equal, but that they have a collaborative role with those other teachers has really improved their self-worth and helped them deal with some wounds. And the one gal that I'm thinking of is never going to get out of prison, right? But that still gives her a place to make her life valuable while she's in prison. And I think sometimes we forget about that. You might be dealing with some people that have a really long sentence, but we still have this great place that we can help heal some of those wounds with that. And just even allowing them to be tutors and giving of themselves to others, it has a great power. So, and they learn that from the teachers, right? They learn how to be great tutors from those people that are teaching, that are showing them those teaching skills.
Right, and I agree with you, and I think the tutoring situation over in the camp is probably more unique than any other place I've seen. So it's great that you noticed that.
Absolutely. Like I said, the one specific woman that I'm thinking of, like, she didn't ever even want to take a sick day, even if she was sick, because it gave her so much personal strength of and improving her self-worth that's where she wanted to be. That was the one place that she felt safe and she felt good about herself when she during her incarceration. Anybody else have anything that they want to share?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. The main problem I see is both men and women is low self-esteem. I've had students where they're told they're stupid, they're idiots, and the worst thing I hate is they believe it. And then I'll show them their test. No, look at these. These are hundreds, these are 90s, these are A. You're very smart. And they have a hard time believing that because I tell them this is evidence, and you tell everybody else they're not so smart because you are. And then it's nice to see when they finally accept and realize they're not what people tell them are, what they are when they put them down.
I love that. It's changing, that belief of the labels that are put on them. And I think you guys as teachers, when you guys, I love that example of, hey, you got a 90 on your test. This isn't somebody that's stupid that can get a 90 on this. You are smart. And I don't think we can ever underestimate that need for praise, right? We all thrive when people point out the things that we do well. And we know prison jail environment, it's not a place where people are in there patting people on the back saying, good job, you got up on time today, you did this. And so thank you, because I think those little things do sometimes help them get through their difficult days.
Hey, Marcy.
Yes.
Hi, this is Leah Sherritt. I work in Promontory. I do not work with women, I work with men. But I always, and I say this in class too, I teach language arts and science along with Patty, and Patty teaches math and social studies. And we love working together, and the guys know it. And so they feel comfortable coming in, trying to build that community, and that open communication. And one thing that we do in there is we don't do the pull-up system that they have in the dorm for negative behaviors. We handle it ourselves, either with a discussion, or if it's something serious, we'll go to corrections immediately. And we tell them that up front. But I also tell them you are free to communicate in here and share your feelings and what have you. And I always say, I don't know who invented this prison culture, but I hate it because all of you want to get back out and not be in prison, but yet we live by this code even on the streets. So how can you get out of the culture if you don't let it, I said, it's a catch-22 with you guys. So you want to not be this inmate in this culture, but yet you won't let the culture die because you're worried about image and you're worried about labels and things like that. And they all go, yeah. And I'm like, well, stop. Like, how could we in 2021 change prison culture, at least in Utah? I don't know that we could do it in the feds or anywhere else because it's just a completely different environment. But especially moving to a new prison, I feel like we have a chance to kind of rip the carpet out.
So let me speak to some of those things that you shared. So I like that in your classroom, you have your own structure of how you handle problems. So when you talk about the pull-up system, so for those that aren't familiar with what you're talking about, basically we have a therapeutic community, and part of that structure is we have a system that's basically a consequence system. And the best way for me to explain it to you is in everybody's household, you have a way that we consequence people for their behavior. And that's basically what the pull-up system or relay system in our therapeutic communities are. It's that big home, and this is the structure for consequences. So I think, once again, it's about creating that safe place in your classroom, but helping them understand that there are consequences, right? It's just like if you don't turn in your homework, we can't let them continually have a bye to turn into next week because your dog ate your homework and this, da-da-da-da. Because we all know if they want to go on to college, there's no professor out there that's like, hey, it's due on this day and you gave me 10 excuses and I'm going to let you turn it in on the last day of class.
Right.
You just get a 0, right? But so there's a natural structure that you put in. And I think that's what we're all trying to do, and it is a really big job And there is no way to 100% do it correctly in corrections, but we all have our piece of how we do that. And we do it with, respect and real clear lines with them, because the more that they know what to expect, the easier it is for them to follow that. And that's the culture that we want to create, is a place where they know what the expectations are, and they also know that there's help and steps to help them meet those expectations. So yeah, good point. And we all know, whether it's education, work, therapy, programming classes, all of those are a little bit of a safe spot for our offenders to get away from the culture that the offenders create for themselves. I mean, there's some of this that we'll never get away from. The offenders create their own culture, and it's their survival culture, right or wrong. And that's the way it's always been, and it's the way it will always be. Hopefully we can continue to influence that by bringing in good programs that kind of take them out of that constant negative culture that they create amongst themselves to survive. And we give them more resources to build a new sense for themselves and to set better boundaries with those around them. Thank you. Like I said, I wish we had more time when we were in person, because I really think you guys sharing your experiences is really the most valuable of learning. So do that. I'm going to show another video, and hopefully this time you'll be able to see it. Can you guys see it? Can someone give me thumbs up if you can?
Yeah, you can see it.
I've been here for about 8 months.
8 months.
9 months. Almost 2 years.
I've been in Mabel Bassett for 12 years. I wouldn't say constantly, but fights do occur.
People fight about stuff. The microwave, showers.
You cut me in line. Fighting is not my first option. I would rather be able to sit down with you and talk about it. We can scream about it if you want to for the first 5 or 10 minutes, but I'm over it after that because no one's listening. But fighting is not an option. That's true for some people.
There are a lot of relationships here. People live here, and everybody needs a companion, I guess. So yeah, that one's true.
Not all prison food sucks, but most of it does.
With so much going on for prison reform, is there nothing we can do about the food? I'm just confused.
I love enchiladas. You just make it off canteen. You can get like beans, noodles, a box of chicken, sour cream, just the basic stuff to make a meal.
Take a shower, man. You smell like a skunk that OD'd on vinegar and died.
That's not true either.
False. I've literally seen women shower like 3 times a day, and I feel like maybe I should be showering 3 times a day.
Our warden lets us have makeup, so that's a plus.
On Canteen, we can buy cover-up, mascara, and eyeshadow. Eyeliner, we use colored pencils. If you wet them, they're just like, they work better than eyeliner. Of course, we all have tricks of the trade. I had my mom send me a really cool Christmas card that was covered in glitter. It just falls right off there. You kind of just scrape it off, and we'll use like gel or hairspray to like keep it there.
And we also have a beauty shop.
Each unit has its own day that they go on. You can get your nails. I got my nails done last week. And you can get your hair cut. For that one day, you get to be like a woman and feel pretty.
There's definitely some scary people in prison. Do I think everyone in prison is violent and dangerous? Absolutely not. I've met some really sweet, honest, good people. And I know that's really hard to believe being that we're in prison, but I've met some really sweet people here in prison.
Most of these women who are here behind violent crimes, I don't want to say all, but most, it's self-defense or bad situations, wrong place, wrong time.
Of course you have your bullies, but that's anywhere you go. It's just your choice to whether you interact with them or not.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
That's false. It was nothing like what I see on television. No one fought that hard for me. No way.
They have a lot of cases to go through, so they just kind of push it on through. Here, sign this. Not a lot of people know what they're signing.
I didn't go on trial and all that. I just took a plea deal. So basically the judge just told me, hey, you're having 5 in, 5 out. Then they sentenced me and I came about a week later to prison.
I had a public defender. He was not up to standard. A year later, someone else was appointed to me. By the time the attorney got all of my paperwork and information, it was so mangled that she was like, this is the best that I can do. I can get you 20 years. Everything is a mess. And if we go to trial, they'll probably try to hang you. So I took it.
No, that's not true.
I was a mom, a wife, a sister. Just made some bad choices. It doesn't mean that I was a lowlife. You do have some people that are just horrible. That's men and women. But not everyone here is a lowlife. So they just made some horrible mistakes.
It's not true.
Absolutely not true.
I'm a great mom. My kids love me dearly, and I love my kids more than anything in life. I actually just got a letter from my son, who is 13. He sent me a picture, and on the back of the picture, he said, Mom, you're the best, even though you're not always there. And so, no, I don't think it makes us bad moms. We made bad decisions. Because of the bad decisions I'm making, I'm missing out on their life.
It's very unfortunate that our children are having to grow up without us, but my son thinks I hung the moon. He would run up to me and tell me that I'm his whole heart. What would you say back to him? You know you're mine too.
You have some of the best parenting happening right here. Women are reaching out to their children every day. They go to camp. They go to Girl Scouts. They write letters. They're taking parenting classes. They're doing a lot to help the restoration of their family. So women are putting forth a lot of effort. They're not bad moms.
What do I love about myself?
I love my eyes. They're hazel green and they changed to like this pretty hazel color with my moods.
I'm very optimistic. Yeah, I'm optimistic. Yeah.
I have a great heart. If I see somebody that is in need, I mean, I will give somebody the shirt off my back.
I like my smile, which I used to close down and hide.
I would have to say I'm resilient at best. The past couple of years have been a lot for me, but I just keep going every day trying to do better. Prison is like a little underworld. We have relationships, there's little groups. Walk in the yard, it's like stepping out. Who can step out and have their hair the straightest and their contraband makeup on the best, you know? You can put me in prison, but I still have a personality. We still like to laugh. We still like to have fun. I mean, we have to keep living some way or another.
People hold us at such a low bar when, in fact, we're intelligent. We're just like anybody else. Just because I couldn't get out of my addiction doesn't make me a bad person. I'm still a really good person inside and out, and people tend to forget that, I think.
And there's some people that actually come here and see their mistake for what it was, and they go, okay, I'm not gonna go back to that life.
The misconception that people may have about me is that I'm no good because I've been in prison. I am so much more than the box that anybody could put me in.
It goes back to that old saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. A cover's not a story. You never know what that book's been through.
There may be some things from that you agree with or you disagree with, given your experience of working with offenders. But, and what I would also say about the women that they chose to speak, they've been in prison probably for a minute and they're in a better place. We know that sometimes the offenders that you're getting in your class are still really struggling, and it's going to take them a minute before they could maybe even talk as fluidly as these women. And some of the things that they're doing, and I apologize, I don't know what prison this is from, we don't have all those same things. But what I do like about this is there are a lot of myths about what it's like to be in prison and who these women are. And I think it's important for us to constantly be challenging ourselves. Is this a myth or is this a truth when we're working with our clients? And when people ask you about working in prison and, you know, they You know, I really hate the show The Orange is the New Black because once again, it's sensationalizing something that's not really how it is. They might take a little bit of truth and then they make it made for TV, for lack of a better term, right? One of the things that came up in that video is we're not bad moms. What I would say is their parenting style has negatively affected their children. And I would say many of those women, they love their children dearly. Some, it's probably not in the best interest of their children for them to continue to be involved. And that's when we have DCFS get involved and make that decision. But I'm going to tell you, for the majority of those children, the very best thing that we could do for them is help their moms get in a good place and be in their life. Because we all know as educators that children love their parents, even when they say they hate them, right? We are a part of our parents, and we see that when we look in the mirror. And we see, the older we get, fortunately, unfortunately, we see a little bit more of our mom or our dad in us. And so we want to hold on to those things that are good about them. And so that's kind of, I feel like, one of our big roles is to help them improve their sense of self so that they can be better parents. At least 1 in 50 children has a parent that's incarcerated in our local or county facilities. So, you know, that's a lot. And I think a lot of times, you know, if you're educating on the other side of this with children in our regular public school systems, we don't look out and say one out of every 50 kids that I am teaching has a parent that's incarcerated. I think we teach at a rate that it's more like nobody has children that are incarcerated, right? So we really need to be mindful of that. About 2/3 of those teens whose mothers have arrested histories also have fathers with arrested histories. So typically, if the mom's in prison, the dad's been in prison or jail at some point as well, right? And so this leads us back to this pathway that women get to prison or jail. Usually they're in relationships with others that have criminal histories that's adding to that. And there's usually some piece of trauma that's led them to prison or jail. So 1 out of every 10 children with an incarcerated mother ends up in foster care. You know, I just have to give kudos to our foster care system because it is a really hard job and it doesn't pay a lot. And it's very emotional, right? Like you have a child in foster care and the parent finally gets their parental rights reinstated and that child goes back to that parent. And then there's this yo-yo, then they get rearrested and they go back in jail and that child goes back into foster care. So we kind of see that we're creating this generation of everyone that's incarcerated, all of their children, by not really focusing on helping those women get out and get reunited with their children. We're creating that next generation of children that are coming our way because your risk to follow in your parents' footsteps if you've been in foster care is exponential in comparison to those that are not in foster care. And, you know, last but not least, without effective intervention strategies, as many as 70% of children of incarcerated parents may be involved in the criminal justice system. So, you know, just what I said, but 70% of those children of incarcerated parents, that's really concerning. And that's why we have such a big role and a heavy weight on our shoulders is to say, if we don't want to continue the generations coming our way, what we're doing really matters with these women. We want to get them out. We want to get them back involved with their children so that we can kind of stave that off. So for the children, we know, and you may think this is just common knowledge, but I just think it's really important for us to recognize, you know, socially, children that have parents that are incarcerated, they are going to have more acting out behaviors. That's how children express their depression, right? When a child's depressed, they're typically not crying and hiding out in their room like, you know, or having the typical symptoms that you would have for an adult that's depressed. Usually a child, if they're acting out, my first thing as a clinician is to say, whoa, what's going on? This child's having some depressive, some anxiety in their life. Friendship problems, right? Like how many people will say, oh, if you know your child's hanging out with a friend whose parent's in prison, do you really want them to hang out with them? And those children know that. And so they don't gravitate to friends whose parents usually aren't in prison or jail. They'll usually gravitate to other people who have parents that are similar. I mean, that's just what we do naturally with friendships. We find people that have like life circumstances or like interests. So socially, they really get stunted. You know, emotionally, which goes right back into that social piece, is, you know, they do have a lot more depression, anger, confusions, feelings of abandonment. A lot of times they blame themselves. If I would have just done better, or if I wouldn't have talked back, mom wouldn't have got high, and then she wouldn't have gone to prison. And so it's just kind of that ongoing cycle. Usually, you know, they're just trying to survive the system, and the families or the friends that are kind of helping out, or even the state systems that intervene with them, getting them the therapy and the support that they need is really hard. One of the biggest things that usually happens is they don't get that opportunity to go and visit their parents. As Marcy Remington, I'm just going to say it as that, have real concerns that we don't have better visiting policies for children with their mothers in prison. We really need to strengthen that, because we want to keep those connections. We want to give those mothers healthy opportunities. That's going to lead to them being more motivated for rehabilitation and learning, is if they have something that they're working towards. Academically for children, you know what, if I'm worried about my mom getting beat up in prison, how easy am I studying for my spelling test? How well am I able to concentrate on my algebra problems? I'm not. They have so many other extra worries that are going on that conflict with that. You know, those learning issues. I'm really excited. I wish I didn't have I have an all-day meeting today that I wish I could be in, because I really love to hear what you guys are going to talk about when it comes to learning disabilities, because we know that there is a large part of that. Sometimes those learning disabilities are just these children being pulled in and out of school systems because their parents are in and out of jails. And so they get really behind, and that just adds to that. You know, there's that other piece that's a little bit more biological to their learning disabilities that may come from their parents using drugs. Without visits, children often believe that the parent no longer loves them and cares for them. So once again, that's why I have this strong belief system that we need to improve our visiting with children and their parents. Some research says that visiting increases the likelihood that the relationship will survive when the parent is released. Some feel visiting a parent in jail is too traumatic. I can't even tell you in my career the conversations that I have had throughout corrections that are on both sides. I'm going to tell you, as a therapist and healing people, you can't heal people when they're apart. You can only heal people when you put them together. And so I know people get really stressed out and worried that the environment is too traumatic. I don't know. I think not seeing somebody that you love is pretty traumatic. I think this COVID era has shown us that we need each other. We are not meant to be isolated creatures, and we feel better when we can see each other, we can hug each other, we see each other's facial expressions, not over a camera, but in person. It's just that, it's personal. And I have a really great video that I'm going to show you on this. So immediately following a visit, children may be sad, tired, tearful, or engage in aggressive behavior. And I think that's that education piece for those that are caring for them, those loved ones, to let them know that's okay. It's okay for you to be mad at your mom that she's in prison. It's okay for you to be sad. If you act out, it doesn't mean that they're not given consequences, but we help them understand, you know, how that acting out behavior is related to maybe some other feelings they were having after they left. Sesame Street is kind of really, truly amazing, and they're always being innovative. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Sesame Street, but they are super innovative, and they have a whole series of how to talk to parents in prison. So I'm going to show you this video because I just can't even do it justice to talk about it.
Little children?
Big challenges. Incarceration. My dad's in jail.
Why?
I don't like to talk about it. Most people don't understand.
Actually, I do understand what you're going through. When I was about your age, my dad was incarcerated too.
He was?
Wait, what's carcerated? And why was your dad in it?
Incarcerated is when someone breaks the law, a grown-up rule, and then they have to go to jail or prison.
And your dad was incarcerated?
Yes, he was in prison. So I know how hard it can be, Alex.
Yeah, it is hard.
You're not alone. I've been there too. Many children have. Many are like you.
Mom writes me letters almost every day, and Dad leaves them in my room to read when I get home from school. I miss her a lot.
It's hard not to be able to touch or hug each other, but Daddy blows me a kiss. I tell him I'll save it for later. I wish Daddy could come with us, but this is where he has to be because he broke a law.
How long have you and your mom been apart?
A few years.
A few years. What's hard about it? Like, what's the hardest part of it?
When I'm traveling and then I see children with their mothers and playing and everything. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder how it feels to be like that.
Look around and you'll see people who take care of you,
who've lived it and will share with you,
who always will be there for you. Like me.
And me.
And me. You're not alone.
So they have a whole series to help both caretakers of those that are incarcerated, for the parents that are incarcerated, to teach them how to talk with their children about it, to talk with their friends. That would be my ideal job. I think this is something that most prisons and jails struggle with, is focusing on that parent-child relationship, because there's so many other things that we're doing. But I bring this up because I think for you guys, just kind of being aware of how this weighs on them, and even being able to sneak in ways to talk to their children is really, really helpful and powerful in helping those that we're working with. The other big thing that I do think is important if you're sharing information like this is it's important to talk about a parent being in prison or jail or incarcerated at an appropriate level. Like, we do not want to stress out small children that dad has to get a shank to protect himself in jail, right? And so those things are really important to talk about it at an age-appropriate level. And that's the one thing I would tell you most parents struggle with. They don't sometimes understand that. So from an education point of view, of helping them understand what is age-appropriate at a certain age. Because a lot of our offenders will say, well, I knew all about, the birds and the bees when I was 8 years old. And I'm like, yeah, if you did, that is too bad, because that is just really inappropriate, right? And we want your children to not have to experience having to grow up before they're developmentally ready. Okay, so this is probably my ultimate documentary that's been done, so I apologize. I'm not sure how long it is. Let's see. It's not very long, but it gives you a really good idea of what a good program looks like in a prison system that's putting those pieces back together with the mothers and their children.
Okay, come on, guys.
no matter what you say, prison is another planet. You know, when you enter prison, it's called inside. She was inside. She was inside. I once wrote a poem. In fact, I wrote it for Jean Harris. And the poem was, it's about a little boy coming home from school one day, and his father said to him, "What do you have to do for homework?" And he said, "Vocabulary." And the father said to him, "Well, what's the first word?" And he said, "Prison." And the father said to him, "A prison is a bad place where bad people go who do bad things." And the little boy said, "Where do good people go who do bad things?"
Well, this is a maximum security prison. The moms are here from anywhere from a life sentence to maybe a 5-year sentence. One thing that doesn't get addressed really anywhere else is that these kids have been hurt. They've been hurt by their mothers because their mothers left. And they need to sort of reconcile, and they need to heal some of those wounds. And that happens in here. I was just actually talking to one of the mothers, and she said, "This is not my home. You can't tell me this is my home." I said, "You know what? You're right. But wherever you are is where your child is at home."
Initially, being a mother from here, I was burdened with guilt. I was fighting depression. I was struggling because, like every woman in this penitentiary, whether they're a mother or not, I was broken. In a way, we're all sick and broken when we enter these gates, or we wouldn't be here.
So this is what happens when you don't get things always updated.
I think the main thing is just have strength and believe, and you have to have some kind of purpose. And my purpose is...
So there's a whole lot more to this. Is a whole documentary that's like a good hour long. You can get online and watch it. It's called The Mothers of Bedford, and it talks about a nursery program. It talks about a family parenting program that they do, and it spans a 5-year period, I believe, and what the successes of that are, and it's really powerful. But I think it's just really important to recognize that whatever it is, whatever program you're over and you're developing, it has impact for these clients to help them be whole. So, you know, some of the successes that we've had in our prison, at the Utah State Prison, for our women, we've had facility improvements. Something as simple as putting ladders on the beds for women. A lot of times we incarcerate women the same way we do men, and we don't even think about it. And so we, as women, we don't have the same upper body strength. If you haven't ever noticed, we don't have big football shoulders, right? And so when it comes to climb up on that bed, it's amazing how many injuries we were having and how many women were falling down. So just getting that ladder for them to climb up decreased that. Gender appropriate uniforms. There was a time at the Utah State Prison, and I'm not sure what it's like in the jails, but we had the exact same uniforms as men, which are all white, right? We went to an all white uniform. You can surmise why that is not appropriate for women and the battles that created for some of those women. just even where the pocket's placed. On a men's shirt, the pocket is placed over the breast. Well, you can imagine that's probably very inappropriate in a women's uniform to constantly having to be putting stuff there and drawing that attention. It would make them very uncomfortable. So they've placed the pocket down on the bottom part of their shirt so that it's just a little bit more of a gender appropriate placement for that. Training, we are constantly trying to improve training and the programs that we're developing. I would tell you that's the meeting that I'm going back to today, is specifically focusing on the training and the programs and the fidelity in which we do them. And I'm sure as educators, I'm preaching to the choir there, right? You guys are constantly re-looking at the curriculum that you're teaching and that it has good evidence that this is the right way to help people learn. Before COVID, we had a volunteer kind of organization called Your Parole Requires Extensive Preparation, where we were bringing people from the community out to work with these offenders and to get them integrated, to kind of help break down some of those cultural barriers, to get them out of their cells in the evenings and when these volunteers could come out. A mentor program where we actually have mentors in the community that are working with them when they parole to help them be successful, so that the only person that's not mentoring them is their sister who's also been in prison and is still struggling to get her stuff. We're pairing them with people that are successful, that have good skills already developed in their life. And last but not least, and this is why I'm really ready for COVID to be over, is we were doing a kids' day with both our men and women's programs, substance abuse programs, where the children did come out and they did interact with those moms and they did get a picture and they got to do those things that all the other kids get to do with their mom. They get to paint a picture. They get to do a craft with them. And if you don't think that that's not a big deal, that those kids take those little crafts home and they put them where they can see it, and they now have an opportunity to tell their friends, yeah, I did this with my mom, whether or not they know their mom's in prison or not. It's still kind of this rite of passage that you got to do this with your mom or your dad. Makes a big deal. It also kind of helps them deal with those abandonment issues, that my parents didn't forget about me. They do love me, and this is how I know. We were laughing and jumping and interacting together. So I feel like that is like so much more important than we realize of how it changes people. I can remember years and years and years ago when I first started, I set up a family therapy session with an offender that hadn't seen his son. And I have a funny feeling that was probably the only, it had to be a supervised visit, and I made sure that happened. And I'm pretty sure that was the last time that man got to see. And it was a very positive visit. And I'm sure that child for the rest of his life remembered that one interaction where his father got to remind him that in spite of his poor choices, that he loved him and wish he could be a part of his life. And so that those words echo for that person as they grow up. I think I just kind of want to wrap up with your experience matters. You guys have a lot of experience, and I hope that you guys continue to share the things that you have seen and what works. That there's a lot of us, whether it's our correctional educators, whether it's our probation and parole officers, whether it's our correctional officers, whether it's our social workers, we all overlap in what our value in helping these offenders feel that they have. And I think that's just really important when we recognize we all are working with these people to help them. It's not to necessarily get a paycheck for us. It's to help them be better citizens and heal. Some other things that you can do to kind of help these people heal is rethink your own preconceived ideas and stereotyped attitudes about crime and an incarcerated parent. I kind of go back to that one where you hear these women saying, I'm a good mom. I think it would be really easy for people to look back and say, no, you're not there for them to do whatever. And I'm like, you know what? Be willing to kind of rethink what your belief system is. They're still at least a part of their child's life. They're trying, they're writing letters, they're doing whatever. That's still an important piece for them. Educate others. Your voice matters. When we we talk amongst ourselves, and hopefully we're learning. That's why you guys are having this online seminar, so that we can learn. But I think the other big piece is talking with our families and our friends and our neighbors, and dismissing some of the beliefs that they have out there. I think a lot of times we make decisions based upon what we don't know, which can be really dangerous. And it's really dangerous for our society, for everybody to think that everybody that's in prison is like what's on TV, because that's not true. These are our brothers, our nephews, our cousins, our uncles that are incarcerated. And if you don't have someone that's incarcerated or been in trouble with the law, you're lucky, because I think it's really rare for a family to not have somebody in their extension that's had some sort of life problem that may have taken them on that path. And last but not least, learning to be compassionate and help break the cycle. Don't assume that nothing can be done. I don't think any of us would be in our roles if that's where we were at. But, you know, and I'm the first to admit this, I have some days where I get really frustrated and irritated with those that I'm working with that might not be receptive or kind of give me a little bit of heartburn in my job. And I have to remind myself to take a step back and continue to be compassionate. They're acting out that way because they're hurting, and they don't know any other way to express that hurt than to just be ornery and frustrating at times. Ultimately, society may be confronted with a choice. We can punish offenders more severely and risk changing them for the worse, or we can design sentencing rules in prisons in a way that helps offenders rehabilitate and change for the better. And that's pretty much what I heard one of you guys say in your comments is, you know, we're building a new prison. We're preparing the next generation of teachers. What is our role as we pass that baton in those systems? You know, I think if we can continue to work on designing programs that help rehabilitate, help offenders see their worth and their value back into society, we can definitely be a part of that solution of impacting society for the positive. Thank you for letting me come and speak with you. Like I said, I think the worst part of this is I love a lot more interaction, so I hope this was helpful in spite of that lack of interaction.
Thank you, Marcy. I really like that. Just different perspective, maybe from what we usually talk about during these meetings, and talking about some of the impacts of incarceration, both on them and their family, so that we can be more aware of how to more holistically educate these students that we're interacting with on a daily basis, or at least were before COVID. Anyway, thank you for your time this morning. Super appreciate that. You did a great job. Do you have a second to answer questions if anyone has?
I do. Whoops, I think I did.
Yes, they did ask, there was a question earlier on in the chat that they were asking about the first video, the name of the first video that we weren't able to see and we just heard.
So if you will type in Healing Mean, that will come up. So that was, I just showed you the little trailer, but there's a whole video about Healing Mean. And it's a really amazing story of a woman that just had a terrible criminal history, a terrible drug addiction, and she finally sees the light and gets some trauma work done and is able to get out of prison and become an advocate. And we're seeing more and more of those stories. And I really feel like there's more women that have been incarcerated, that they get their life together and they really want to give back, and they're making a great impact. But it's a great video if you have time to watch it.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? That's all that was in the chat from earlier. I'll give a second for responses to that. If not, then we will reconvene at 10:30 as same link, and we'll go to the inmates' perceptions of academic offerings in Utah's prisons. But wanted to give a minute for anyone to ask questions if they had any.
This is Michelle Christensen from CUA. And I kind of have a unique scenario because I am the Southwest facilitator for DCFS, and I work at the prison. And it's really neat to see how motivating children are to the inmates, that they really do care about their children. And a lot of the things I do to reach out to them is to talk to them about their kids and say, okay, you might not be able to see them, but they can call you with a math problem and you can help them, and that's a way to connect to them. And I try to use that in different ways, and it seems to really help, and it motivates a lot of the inmates to really want to try.
Thank you. That is perfect. I think getting these parents, and I think the school part is really great. Like, even if they're talking about their own educational learning, it opens that door to have a conversation with their child about what's really going on with them, which is, as parents is probably 80% of our job when they're young, right, is talking about school and helping them move forward with that. So that was great.
Thanks, Michelle, for your comment. Any other questions or comments? All right, then we'll go ahead and just say